Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again on the Thursday afternoon talking some hoops. And we're going to kick it old school today because we're not here talking college basketball. We're going to go back to the roots when we launched this podcast years and years ago. And we're going to talk some NBA. That is right, folks. May not be for our normal audience, but got some requests on the side from some of our old school listeners and some of us that have been with us since day one of the podcast. And hey, they wanted to hear some NBA talk. So we're here. It's the NBA playoffs, which means things are getting good now. No more tanking. 82 game regular season is completed. We've already had the play-in tournament, a healthy majority of it already settled. And we're here. We're going to talk about those games. We're going to mention the first round of the NBA playoffs because that's when things are going to get spicy. That's when the stars come up to play. And, for a guy that's been covering college basketball from, pretty much through the early portions of November all the way to March, that's in the rearview mirror now. The transfer portal stuff is always madness. And, we're going to let the dust settle there. But for now, we're going to be talking some NBA hoops. So, things are getting really good out there in the professional landscape of basketball. And, we're going to get some quality ball now, which I'm most certainly excited for. This is when, the NBA, I've been very critical of it, saying, hey, the regular season, it's tough to get through. We'll just put it like that, because I can go on tangents for days on what needs to be fixed within the NBA. And, I think part of that is a shortened schedule. I think from 82 to 68 games, we would be most certainly fine. I think it would solve a lot of problems, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk playoffs, and it starts with the play-in. Now, of course, the play-in tournament for the 7 and 10 seeds of the Western and Eastern Conference. And, I've been critical on this thing as well. Like, hey, most of these teams are below 500, especially on the Eastern Conference side. It's usually two lousy below average teams that are just going to get drilled by the 8th seed. But I have to say, we've had the play-in games from Tuesday, Wednesday. We're here recording on a Thursday. These games have delivered. We're like 3 for 4. You can argue 4 for 4 thus far on the play-in games, and we still got 2 more tomorrow that we'll most certainly touch on. But I wanted to very briefly just go really quickly and rattle off, just some of these games. And, let's start out with a team that I've been ecstatic to watch over the past, I would say, couple months now, since I've started to get back to the NBA side and, really watch it closely. And that is the Charlotte Hornets, because the 9th seed Hornets, this was a team that got off to a putrid start to the regular season. And this is a team that has played extremely well through the second half of the season. I'd say since post All-Star break. They're 30-12 in the second half of the season. The regular season, that is. And this was a team that was historically would never get the coach right, would never play defense. And here they are, they're 12th in defensive rating. Really was an exciting bunch. You saw really that Charlotte Hornets crowd. If you saw these games, towards the back end of the regular season, there was life back in that building. And I felt like you haven't really seen that since like the early Kemba Walker days. The Charlotte Hornets were hosting a meaningful game in April, which is always a good sign. You always want parity within your sport. And, some fresh blood with the Charlotte Hornets that are, got a respectable young core. They're going up against the Miami Heat here, against the play-in kingpins who have been in this thing since, every year. Even when they went to the finals with Jimmy Butler, a couple years back, they were in the play-in tournament. So they're no strangers to this. Ultimately, it was a 127-126 overtime victory for the Hornets. This was an awesome watch from start to finish. Charlotte, like we said, they're a young team. They're led by LaMelo Ball, who's been very inconsistent as far as staying on the court. He's played like 20-something games, 30-something games. He's got 72 games, and this year I think he's in the 70 range as far as games played. He was healthy this year. And when he's on the court, good things are going to happen for the most part. I do think his shot selection is all over the place, and that drives me nuts as, just a a viewer of the NBA. Some of these guys just take ridiculous shots. LaMelo, one of these younglings that falls right into that category. And I thought this game in particular from LaMelo Ball was your typical LaMelo Ball experience. 30 points, 5 rebounds, 10 assists, went 2 for 16 from 3. He had himself a dirty play that I'll talk about here in a minute. And I'm not afraid to say dirty play because, if you saw the game and you saw the replay surfacing, on the internets, you know what I'm talking about. But Charlotte is just one of these teams where, they're just they just play a fun brand of basketball. And it's good that they're playing some defense now because I felt like they've always had talent. They've always had scores. It's just a matter of, can these guys stay on the court? Can they mold it all together? Charles Lee, former Boston Celtic assistant under Joe Mazzulla. I feel like this organization finally got the coach right. A young guy that could kind of relate to the players a little bit. It's kind of got that little, he can relate to the younger generation a little bit, compared to some of these old stiffs that they had who were just, going by the book and their old school approach. I feel like that's important for a young and up and coming team, like the Hornets that have a lot of these, street ball type guys, like the Brandon Millers, like the LaMelo Balls, like we talked about. Con Knipples, we said it, a year ago when we were doing the draft, that it was going to be the perfect fit and the perfect piece for the Hornets because they had all these ball handlers and Con can play off the ball. And, they were surging so well in the second half that they went and bought Kobe White, the former North Carolina guard, and was on the Chicago Bulls for several years. And, it's games like these where you have to make a ballsy move. The Charlotte Hornets had to do. They had a bench Con Knipple, who's in the Rookie of the Year conversation. And, they went with Kobe White for pretty much the entire fourth quarter and overtime of this game. And, he ended up scoring 17 of his 19 points in the second half, and in overtime hit a big 3 late. I mean, some of the shots that he was hitting were just ridiculous. And, that's why he was, really the starting point guard out there in Chicago. I think it's a luxury for the Hornets that he comes off the bench for this team. Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges provided some really good, complimentary scoring. I mean, more than complimentary. 23 points for Miller. Miles Bridges had 28. Players that are effective in their own ways, right? Miller's more of a shot creator. Bridges will kind of give you more on the defensive end and can bruise to the lane a little bit more. Musa Diabate did get injured in this game, starting center for Charlotte, which I think can be it could be a little bit problematic for their Thursday game that they coming up tomorrow that we'll touch on in a minute. But I just thought overall, this was a really good win for an organization that hasn't had a whole lot of meaningful basketball in a while. And meanwhile, on the other side, the Miami Heat, I mean, they were a tough team, I feel like, to get a read on all year. This was a team that played extremely fast. Defense was mostly optional on some nights, but that's what you kind of get with some of these fast-paced teams in the NBA. And, they were kind of one of these teams. They'd pop up, get a good win against a playoff team, and then they'd kind of, barely hang on against one of these, below average teams in the Eastern Conference. And I just think right now, like we said, they're the kingpins of the play-in tournament. When you're in that category of the National Basketball Association, that means it's time to hit the reset button. And I know they got a stubborn guy in Pat Riley running the operation out there in South Beach, but I think it's time to kind of just really give it all up right now. Because, they got Tyler Hero, they got Bam Adebayo, they've ran it back with this core surrounded with Andrew Wiggins and Davion Mitchell, and they plugged in Norman Powell in there, and they got some young, pieces with Jaime Jaquez and Kasparis Jagiellonis. I think it's time that you ship off Hero, you see what you can get for Bam. I know both of those guys are, getting paid a hefty chunk right now, and they're a big part of the salary, but I just think right now for Miami, you need to go young, and you just kind of need to hit the reset button because what you're doing right now, leveling out at 9th in the East, and you have this fluky playoff run with Jimmy Butler a few years ago when you went to the finals and lost. It's just not working, and it sucks for a guy like Spoelstra. That's just such a good coach in this sport. The fact that he keeps having to, middle out with this roster every year, and the fact that he's, kind of leveling out with and really trying to maximize it, and he's getting to where he is right now every single year. To me, that's problematic, and I think they need to hit the reset button. I think if you were to ask a Miami Heat fan, I think they need to hit the reset. They would probably say the same thing. But I don't know what the organization thinks. And I think personally, I mean, we got a large enough sample size on what you need to do here. This is why you're in the same spot. This is why Chicago's in the same spot in the East. It's just sometimes you just got to give it up. And, but some of these guys are just too stubborn. That, the general managers and the vice president of operations. So, that's just the way I think of it. As far as the whole LaMelo Ball and Bam Adebayo play, it's a dirty play by LaMelo. It's that simple. I mean, he's literally going for the ankle, on the play in the second quarter. Bam lands hard on his back. That was just a hard impact fall on the hardwood, ends up knocking him out of the game. And that's a tough scene. Now, it's from an officiating standpoint, it's very difficult because the fact that it was a live ball scenario and the ball never ended up going out of bounds, it's just a play on. I saw the league came out today and said, hey, you know what? If it's a dead ball, we're going to stop. We're going to look at it and say, you know what? More often than not, we're going to call that a flagrant one. It's probably a flagrant one. You can argue a flagrant two for the unnecessary and excessive contact. And the fact that it was really not a basketball play being made by LaMelo. He's just going straight for the ankle. So that sucks for Miami. Does it have impact on the game? Most certainly. Bam's one of their best players. You probably think the Hornets probably get away with the win in that spot, but you don't know. It's a 1-point game. So that certainly stinks. But Miami wasn't going to go anywhere regardless anyway. But it is what it is. Miami season's over. Charlotte's moving on to the second play-in game. And we'll talk about that in a minute. As far as the other game that went on 2 nights ago, as in Tuesday, the Portland Trailblazers and the Phoenix Suns. This was the 8-seeded Blazers and the 7-seeded Suns. So winner of this game would be the locked-in 7 seed into the Western Conference. They'd face off against the Spurs. I've been telling a lot of people, and just because we would talk ball and, just how our conversations would go, I would tell people, hey, keep an eye on these Portland Trailblazers because they're young. I said this before the year started because I liked the way that the direction that they were going in. They would always be in the lottery and they'd just be picking, always in the top 10 every single year. And I just felt like, very similar to Charlotte, like they were finally pitching away and making the right draft picks. They got away from the Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum era, sold off what they could. And, when you draft guys like Shaedon Sharpe, who was like a top 5 pick, Donovan Clingan, top 7 pick. They made the trade for Denny Avdia, which has most certainly been, way much better than probably what the Blazers thought when they made that trade that day a few years ago. So, they've been pitching away with a lot of good transactions, this organization. And I just felt like, hey, it's a loaded Western Conference still. If you can make the play-in tournament, that would be awesome for this franchise, just given all the young assets that they have. And last year, you saw it in the second half. If you were kind of monitoring them, they went on this crazy 10-game win streak out of nowhere. No one was really talking about it. And their young players were just starting to emerge. Like Tamani Kamara is a really good 3-and-D piece, right? Like he shoots the 3 at a high level. I mean, he's streaky, but, he's over 35% from 3, it seems like. He is a defensive stopper on the wing. And he is just going to be on your best player every single night. And more often than not, it seems like he's going to win the battle. He most certainly won the battle in a game like this because Portland was victorious. Now, Denny Avdia, I mean, he's been awesome for this organization all year, averaging 24 points per game. He had the game of his life on Tuesday night against the Phoenix Suns on the road. 41.7 rebounds, 12 assists. And the key to him has just been really for him going to his right side. He drives to his right a ton. The jump shot has really not been there. It's just He is just one of these terrific slashing forwards that knows how to draw contact and get to the rim and really finish with contact. And he gets fouled on all of these shots. So I don't want to hear any of this. I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about how he just doesn't get how he gets a friendly whistle, like an SGA whistle. No, that's not the case. He is legitimately getting fouled on a lot of these plays. And he is just so hard when he gets to his right and he gets downhill. You put him in a pick and roll, he's off to the races, and he's either going to the line for two or he's laying it up and in with contact. Or at the end of the game in Phoenix, he has a game-winning and one bucket. Pretty much on the second to last possession in regulation to seal the game. He's just been so impactful in that area. And like we said, the jump shot's not there. Man, if he could develop a consistent three-point shot, because he takes a lot of threes like all of these NBA players do, but it's just really an inconsistent jumper right now. So I think that's the next gear to his game. But man, has he been fantastic. I also just think having adults in the room for this organization has just been really good. Like having a guy like Jeremy Grant for a couple years, that's an important guy. To me, Drew Holiday, the trade probably didn't make sense to a lot of people, but I thought for Portland at the time, it was really good, and he's been in and out of the lineup this year. But the fact that Drew Holiday is playing meaningful basketball, you just kind of need a vet. You need the quote-unquote term vet, like a lot of these players say. Like you'll hear a lot of all-stars say like, hey, who was your vet growing up? And it doesn't necessarily have to be an all-star or a winner like a Drew Holiday, but it just has to be a guy that's been, had a successful, I feel like 12 plus year NBA career, that's been around the block, that's been around a couple different locker rooms, and could really coach a guy along the way over the course of an 82 game season. Cause that stuff's important. And you need that for the youth, especially these guys that are in college that are, 5-star prospects coming out of high school. They go to a Kentucky or a Louisville or, a blue blood in college basketball. They get picked at in the first round of the NBA draft. And all of a sudden you go from playing 32 games or however many games if you go to the NCAA tournament to 82. It's a drastic difference. And you're in like 4 different cities over the course of a week. And it's a long stretch. So I feel like just always having some adults in the room that have been around the block at the professional level will always help for, those young teams. And that's why I thought the Drew Holiday acquisition during the offseason was so important for this Blazers team. Now, as far as this game's concerned, I thought it was going to be a bad matchup for Phoenix. Just because, and Phoenix, let me just put this out there. I had this team power ranked bottom of the barrel in the NBA. Like, I thought this was going to be the 13th best team in the Western Conference, quite honestly. First-year head coach Jordan Ott. They had Devin Booker. They made trades for Jalen Green. I did not think Dylan Brooks was going to be as good as he was. Grayson Allen has been fantastic, even though he's banged up. And, Colin Gillespie got out of Denver via trade, and he's meshed into a really good rotation piece. And my big deal was on why this was such a bad matchup for Phoenix was who's going to stop Deni Avdija? Because I do think Phoenix, they've been a surprise as you see, 7th in the West. No one saw that coming. Maybe not. I don't think even their own fan base. But it was the fact that this front court for Phoenix is still rebuilding, and they invested in some capital in it in the draft. With Kumon Malaloch, who's a project first-round draft pick out of Duke. He's still young. He's got to grow. He's not in the rotation. They got Oso Ighodaro, the former Marquette big, who I really feel like is not really a defensive anchor. He's just more of a pick-and-roll threat and a lob guy. And, I'm trying to think on the other guy that they have on the top of my head who was their starter. But with all that being stated, I just felt like Deni Avdija was going to get whatever he wanted in this game, and he did, and he had the game of his life. And I just thought, like, Portland has all of this length. Like, Holiday's a lengthy guard. Kamara is obviously going to, he's going to be on Booker, and he's going to limit him as much as he can. I just liked Portland's matchup from a defensive perspective, and I just thought Portland was going to get more better opportunities in the half court. And they ultimately did. It was a very close game. It was back and forth. Portland was down double digits, just like the ebbs and flows of an NBA game. It's going to be all over the place. But when it came down to it, Portland in clutch time was just better. And I do think Phoenix does need a point guard. Jalen Green, we've seen now in these playoffs, and I'm very intrigued to see him on in the next play-in game to see what that looks like. Because Jalen Green is just one of these, is just one of these guards. He came from the G League Ignite. Like, he's just going to have the green light. He's just an all-out scorer. I don't really see him as a playmaker. So when you put him in the backcourt with Devin Booker, because I don't think Booker's a point guard. I think he's much better off the ball, a point guard to set him up. And, if you have another scoring threat and a playmaker, he could kind of be a magnet. But I just don't think Booker, if you want to maximize Devin Booker's, full potential, and we've seen it in Phoenix when they had Chris Paul, he plays off the ball and, he's able to get these one-on-ones. And because we've seen now, when you have kind of a lousy, I'm not going to call Jalen Green lousy because I respect him, as a player, but I just feel like you need to keep the defense honest. And more often than not, you're going to draw double teams with Devin Booker on the scouting report. And Jalen Green has just proven that he's been inconsistent in the playoffs. We saw that last year with the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka in that Warriors first round series benched him in the fourth quarter of clutch time games, and nearly all of them in that 7-game series. And, I just feel like Phoenix needs to upgrade in the point guard department. They just need a full-on orchestrator to their offense like they had with CP3, and we saw how Booker flourished in that area. So Phoenix, your season's not over yet. You got to play on Friday night, back in your own building once again, to fight for your playoff lives. But, we weren't expecting Phoenix in this spot at all. I don't know what their timeline is and things like that. I mean, to me, based on what they have with this roster, they're ahead of schedule. But I think regardless, win or lose, I think this was a game that you could certainly look back on and be like, okay, these are the upgrades that we need to make during the offseason. We need to upgrade the front court with some defense, get a little bigger and bulkier, maybe get another wing guy, a true point guard, I feel like, and, see how things go from there. As far as our other games concerned, so Portland's in the 7th seed. We'll get to them. We'll get to their matchup. They're playing the San Antonio Spurs. As far as our other matchup that happened on Wednesday, play-in games, we're still here. The Orlando Magic and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, let me get this out of the way immediately. I was one of these teams that were a complete sucker for the Orlando Magic in the preseason. I said, give me Jamal Mosley to win Coach of the Year. Give me Orlando as a top 3 seed in the East with the Pacers and the Celtics, and who knows what the Raptors are going to look like, and all of these question mark teams in the Eastern Conference. I liked Orlando's young upside. I thought the Desmond Bane trade was going to be, just the ultimate piece that they needed to make this thing go. And boy, has that not been the case. Now, a lot of that has been with injury because Banchero's been out, and then Bane would be out, and then Wagner would be out. Anthony Black was out for a stretch. Suggs was coming off the ACL injury. And Orlando just never got the full core together this year. And I've liked a lot of their draft picks over the years, right? Because I did think the Jace Richardson piece was gonna work. Now we're still out on, like, he's only a rookie. Tristan Da Silva coming off the bench. I thought that was gonna be a quality move. But to me, like, I just thought Orlando, they were so putrid offensively last year, and defensively they were amazing. I was like, okay, just go get yourself an all-out scorer like a Desmond Bane that can play off the ball, and if he's capable of going in takeover mode. And I just thought, like, okay, Orlando's got these young pieces. Mosley, I respect him as a coach. That has not been the case because of the injuries and then the chemistry issues, and it's just been all over the place with this team this year. And this is a team right now, with them losing to Philly, and a Philly team that's got vets on it, but I'll never take the 76ers seriously in the long term. But the fact that Orlando dropped the final regular season game against the scrubs of the Boston Celtics, and, they have quality guys. Anybody that watches college basketball knows Ron Harper Jr. and Baylor Shireman, and like they got some quality dudes. But given Orlando's you know pieces compared to, let's just be honest, like the G League Celtics, even though they're professionals, that's a game you can't lose. I don't care if it's on the road in game 82 of the regular season. And Boston had nothing to play for. You have everything to play for to avoid the play-in tournament. So I just thought that was such, bad vibes heading into this play-in game. We haven't even talked to Nance about the game yet, but I hated that from the Orlando perspective. And just the disconnect when you watch their games, it's just a mess. And offensively, they're still inconsistent. They didn't even break 100 in this play-in game versus the Sixers. So, my guess is that regardless of the result, Orlando, is going to move on from the coach. You can't move off really any of your core because you got Banchero locked up long-term. You have Wagner locked up long-term. You have Desmond Bane, who you gave up 4 first-round picks. I mean, you're not doing that unless, you get, new executives coming in. You're not pulling the plug on that. So I just think, like, this is your core, Orlando. You're going to have to bring in a new coach and see how that works out for you. But with all that being stated, this is a team that's had high expectations. For them to be an 8 seed is just laughable, given what the preseason outlook was on this roster. But Philly, as much as, I talked a lot about them a few moments ago and said I won't take them seriously. They still got Maxey. They still got Edgecombe, the rookie from Baylor. They still got pieces, and they were at home in this one. And I did think ultimately Philly was going to pull this off. I just hated the way when I watched Orlando on Sunday afternoon and saw that, just the way that they looked on the court and off the court, and it was just a mess. So I just think this Magic team is so broken right now that Philly took advantage of a team that is just in their own heads and is just so disconnected on and off the court. So with all that being said, Philly, this was a game that was close through 3 quarters, but Philly, I felt like ultimately pulled away, and they did. Like, you were just kind of waiting for the dam to break from the Orlando perspective in this game. But when you get, a Desmond Bane, outburst, man, Desmond Bane is just one of the better, I feel like he's one of the better players in the league when he's hot, I feel like. I felt like that during even his young Memphis Grizzly days. But even, when you get him in a game like that, like when he's 10 for 16 shooting, you just think everything's going in. He had 34 in the loss. But Maxey, man, I mean, Maxey has 31. Edgecombe has a double-double. Paul George, Drummond, like, they just got a lot of adults in the room. I know, like, you'll never take the Embiid stuff seriously, like he's injured again. But I don't know. Like, Philly is just, I think they gotta ultimately pull the plug on Embiid, get whatever you can get from him, because I like their core with Maxey, Edgecombe. I think Bona can be in peace, and go from there. If I'm running the operation in Philly, that's what I'm doing personally, because I just can't stand this Joel Embiid saga anymore. I feel like I'd speak for a lot of, Philly fans, but even NBA fans. Like, that is a guy that just needs a change of scenery at this point. Just maybe he'll have some better injury luck. I don't know. But that is a lot of body weight and mass that you got to manage. And it just hasn't worked out for either side. And, we've been saying trust the process for a decade now. And I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and it just hasn't really happened. But they're the 7th seed, and they're gonna be playing the Boston Celtics, which is an intriguing first-round series that we'll touch on in a few minutes. As far as our last play-in game that went final, the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Clippers. This is a Pacific Division rivalry. Like, these two teams know each other extremely well. They play each other 4 times a year. I couldn't believe the ownage that the Clippers had. Like, I was like, man, I had to go, think back on, every matchup with these two teams. And I was like, wow, the Clippers have really won 10 of the last 11 and have won every single game since they built that brand new Intuit Dome in Inglewood. And the Golden State Warriors, in a 1-game setting with their backs against the wall with this kind of interesting, roster that they have, given the Jimmy Butler injury and the torn Achilles. When you got a guy like Steph Curry, in the lineup, anything is possible. A 126-121 victory for the Warriors. I mean, what can you say about Steph Curry? I mean, there's really nothing more to say. I mean, he's been doing this for 18 seasons now or whatever the heck it is now. I mean, a decade and a half plus of just Steph Curry brilliance. He's 38 years old. I would just say to every basketball fan, every Golden State Warrior fan out there, enjoy these outbursts, enjoy these performances, because who knows how long you're going to get them for. And then you're going to look back and you're going to be doom scrolling on TikTok or Instagram Reels, and you're going to be seeing all these Curry highlights. You're going to be like, man, that was just some awesome basketball, man. So when Steph has 35 points in a winner go home situation, he has 7 threes. He goes berserk in the fourth quarter with a bunch of those triples. I mean, that is just one of the best players in NBA history, no doubt. He's the best shooter in the entire sport that's ever played. But man, when him and Draymond just got the chemistry going, Draymond had 9 assists, fantastic defensive performance on Kawhi Leonard. But when you just have those guys, running the split action and the organized chaos, and those guys played with each other forever. They know where they need to be in the tendencies and all that stuff within their game. But when those guys are firing on all cylinders and everybody's just kind of playing along with them and kind of knows, all right, Steph and Draymond are going right now. Let's not do too much and, throw a monkey wrench into the madness here. Let's just let them play. Man, is this some beautiful basketball. And I just, like I said, I just say to everybody, like, enjoy games like those that we had on Wednesday, because who knows how many of them you really get. Because Steph's coming off a 2-month injury, which was a pretty serious injury on the kneecap. I mean, he played 36 minutes in this game. He hasn't played 36 minutes since the week of Christmas for the Warriors this year. So, I mean, the fact that you got a game like this from Steph, I don't care if it's a play-in game. That's just an awesome, display of basketball that he just put on. And then when you get 20 points from a Kristaps Porzingis, which I'm going to be completely honest, like, I'm a Warrior fan, but, anybody that knows me and the way that we come on this platform, I'm going to just keep it real with everybody. And, I'm not going to let my fandom get in the way of anything. I'm not the biggest Porzingis guy. Like, I think, if you're 7'3", go into the post and, showcase your strength and, go will your way to the basket for 2. But that's not the style of NBA basketball that we have anymore. I'm glad that he only took 6 threes in this game, because usually it's like 10 on most of these nights when he is on the court. But, Porzingis is on this roster because the Warriors were getting absolutely nothing with Jonathan Kuminga. And this was just purely, a roster move to say, you know what, let's get Kuminga out the door. Let's go get him to a new place, and let's go get somebody that can serve us right now. And, Porzingis, like, the Atlanta Hawks gave him a contract. The Warriors will eat it. They'll pay it. And, they'll do what they will with that. They're in win now mode, and I understand it. But with all that being said, this was a really good Kristaps Porzingis game. And, I don't know how many more times I'm going to say that, whether he's in a Golden State Warriors uniform. But when you get 25-5 from Porzingis and he goes 8 for 12, what more do you want? He had 2 blocks as well. He only had 1 foul, which is big to me, because I was watching some Warrior regular season games and he was driving me nuts. With just some of his decision-making defensively. So, a good Porzingis game, obviously a fantastic Steph Curry game, and just unbelievable Draymond Green defensive performance on Kawhi Leonard. Just shutting him down in the fourth quarter. And Kawhi's been on, one of the most insane stretches of his career from a scoring standpoint. Was he averaging like 28 this year? Just nuts. The fact that, a Draymond Green that's on, the wrong side of his career right now from just a play, from a career standpoint, like, he'll be retiring in a couple of years. The fact that you're still getting like A+ defensive Draymond is pretty insane at this stage of his career against one of the best pure scorers that we have in the sport. So I mean, that was awesome to watch. And then Guy Santos, hey, Mike Dunleavy, like he has not since taking over from Bob Myers, has like his draft picks have been kind of right? The whole Kaminga situation was kind of a little rocky. But Guy Santos for I think it was a Bob Myers draft pick. I'm trying to remember on the top of my head. His second round pick. But regardless, Guy Santos, was a Santa Cruz Warrior guy. He ended up, being in that pipeline for a long while, developed, and smartly the Warriors, converted him to a standard NBA contract and gave him a multi-year deal. Because when you get 20.6 rebounds, 5 assists from Guy Santos, not only a game like this, but he's been consistent I would say, since post All-Star break. I can even go and even before that. He's been really good for the Warriors this year. And, I mean, he's starting in meaningful games. So, when you already know playoff rotations are going to get tighter. So I love the fact that, the Warriors locked him up on a multi-year deal. And I'll tell you what, that's going to be a contract that ages really well for the Warriors. Because in 3 years from now, whenever the contract expires, he's going to be garnering a whole lot more than what he's currently, getting cleared by the checkbook. But overall, I mean, we didn't even talk about Al Horford in this game either. 14 points, like 4 clutch threes in the fourth quarter. That's what you need. And a true professional in Al Horford that's been around the block and it's played winning basketball. That's why, even though this Warrior team's kind of old, they understand the scenario. They understand, hey, this is it, guys. Like, we haven't played together all year, but let's go. I thought Pajemski, like, he's going to be a high volume guy. I think he finally understood, like, okay, let me get out of my way. He was able to get away with that when, the Warrior players were injured. It's like, okay, I'm the number 1, number 2 option on these nights. I kind of have to, jack up 20 shots. But 5 for 11 from Pajemski, I'll live with it. So, I thought this was just a game that the Warriors were, down double digits in like 5 different times, and they never really gave it up. And then kind of the Steph Curry heroics happened ultimately, to get across the finish line here. As far as the Clippers organization, I want to talk about the Clippers here because, this was a team that got off to a disastrous start in the regular season, recovered well in the second half, really kind of gave up on the roster towards in like December. They're like, you know what? We're going to move out of Harden. He's just shockingly requesting a trade on us. And they flip him for Garland. They flip Zubac, for Benedict Mathurin. And, they were just kind of trying to make these moves, trying to make up, trying to reestablish some draft capital with the Zubac trade after the disastrous SGA trade years and years ago that they're still paying the price for. And I think it's to this point right now for the Clippers. And if you're Steve Ballmer, I know he always wants to win and he's going to go all in and he's going to just keep going for it and keep going for it. And even when he's got no more money left on the table, he's going to throw every last dollar into this thing to try to compete for a winner. But I think right now it's to the point where the SGA trade has just aged so terribly for you. And you keep trying to just, retool the roster surrounded around Kawhi. It's just time to move on with everything. I think we're to the point now where get Kawhi out the door. Brook Lopez is 38 years old. Chris Dunn is like, okay, like that's fine. Derrick Jones Jr. is a quality rotation piece on an NBA playoff roster. Garland is in his mid-20s. I say if you're the Clippers, sail off as many pieces as you can for draft capital. And I say the one guy that I would say you should probably keep is Benedict Mathurin because he's 23 years old and he's got 5 years of playing experience and he's a pure scorer that could really impact. And we saw that with the Pacers last year with him coming off the bench. And it's just you got to reestablish young assets and, just with capital, draft capital, and work your way through the pipeline there. That's something that Ballmer might not accept, but that's the way I'd go about things. This is the problem with a lot of these NBA franchises when they're stuck in the middle, which I'm safe to say. I think it's safe to say the Clippers are in this category right now, given the way that the West is shaping out. and even the Warriors. But the Warriors are not good. The Warriors are in a separate category because they're in win now mode with their old core. But the Clippers, like it's been rinse and repeat now with the Kawhi Leonard era for half a decade, and it's time to just completely reset. So that's where I stand. Will they do it? Probably not. But this is one of these teams that just really need to sink the ship and start from ground zero. And look, now they're officially eliminated from everything. and the worst part is they don't even have their own draft pick this year. Oklahoma City's going to have a pick in the lottery because of the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trade. So you could forget about all that. It was a disaster for the Clippers, given all of that that we just stated, and just the way that the season went for them. All right, so we got 2 more play-in games that we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to breeze through the first round of the NBA playoffs for everybody here. Let's talk Friday night, Warriors versus Suns. The Phoenix Suns are a 3.5-point home favorite. This, to me, is a coin flip game. Draymond Green and Dillon Brooks is obviously a storyline everyone's going to talk about. Dillon Brooks is like, bring it on. He already knows that, everybody knows that going back to his Memphis Grizzlies days and even to the Houston Rockets last year, he's got bad history with the Warriors from like just a skirmish standpoint. Like he's going to go out there, he's going to give everything he's got. He's going to go out there and be an enforcer, even though he's having a fantastic year. And I think this is going to fuel both sides for an awesome game. I hope you get a veteran officiating crew for a game like this, just given the history with Dillon Brooks and the Warriors. Of course, Dillon Brooks, like maliciously, like had himself like a dirty play on Gary Payton a couple years ago in the playoff run. That was the year the Warriors won the championship, like in 2021. And just completely like yanked Gary Payton II's arm down, and he was out for the entirety of the playoffs. Brooks and Clay, back when Klay Thompson was a Warrior, have had their fair share of, skirmishes. Obviously, Draymond and Brooks won't back down to each other. I mean, Steph has even been like, hey, what the falafel? Like, stand your ground. Like, what are you doing? So, like, the bottom line is there's bad blood between the Warriors and Brooks, which I think is good storylines. Hey, tune into the game tomorrow. I just trust the Warriors a little bit more in this spot. I think that's ultimately what I have to say with all of this, is that who are you going to trust more in a one-game setting? Are you going to trust a first-year head coach in Jordan Ott? Or are you going to trust a guy in Steve Kerr that's been around the block forever in a game in situations like these? Are you going to take Steph Curry or Devin Booker? Like, I'm going to take Steph, as good as Devin Booker is. And the supporting cast for the Warriors right now, like, I just think that was such a confidence builder, that Clipper win. And they've been on the road for almost a week now. What's one more game in Phoenix? It's going to be a hard-fought game. It's going to come right down to the wire. But I trust the Warriors in clutch time in a spot like this. And what really surprised me with the Warriors in that Clipper game too, which I think can translate in this Phoenix Suns matchup, is how many just backdoor cuts that they had, how many free rides to the rim, like just the lack of the Clipper rebounding. Iguodala's a good rebounder, but still, like, I think the Warriors, I think Pajemski, good rebounder for a guard. Guy Santos is he fights for every 50-50 ball he can go for. If you could get a Kristaps Porzingis like you did a couple nights ago, this is gonna lead to a Warrior victory, and you just hope that the game doesn't get out of control with Dillon Brooks' antics from the Warriors side, where it just takes everybody's head out of their game, because we've seen that with Draymond in these playoff games, where his head gets hot, he picks up a technical foul, and by the second, third quarter, he's lost his mind. And it leads to just, the Warriors being their own worst enemy. And every Warrior fan knows this, where, they're their own worst enemy in a lot of these games, regular season and playoffs, with their turnovers, where they don't get a shot up. They just, and it's unforced turnovers. It's just these guys making bad plays. And it's live ball turnovers that lead to, fast break layups, or in the NBA's case, a wide open corner three, to a sniper, to in this spot, a guy like Colin Gillespie or Royce O'Neal. So that's the way I kind of see things from this perspective. I think the Warriors will get it done. I just think in a game like this, the coaching and I think the experience and I think having guys like Steph and Draymond and, even guys like Santos and Pajemski and clutch time will ultimately matter. And again, with the Phoenix Suns team that is still with their young core, minus Booker and Brooks, of course, are still kind of getting their feet wet into, this type of basketball. And, they're going to have the crowd, of course, like this is win or go home. I just think the Warriors will ultimately get over the mountaintop. And then as far as the other games concerned, I mean, the Hornets and the Magic. The Hornets are a 3-point road favorite in Orlando. I think that tells you all you need to know. I think this is a ticking time bomb that is going to ultimately detonate tomorrow with the Orlando Magic. I think you're going to see Orlando lose this game, and I think it's going to be, just, okay, Mosley, like, by Monday morning, he's going to be out the door, and they're going to probably bring in, like, Taylor Jenkins, who's waiting for a job right now that's been floating in coaching circles, which I would actually love from the Orlando Magic perspective. I thought he did a really good job with those Memphis Grizzlies young teams. A few years back when they were developing Ja Morant and Desmond Bane and, Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, he really maximized those teams until Ja Morant lost his head, of course. So I think Charlotte's going to win the game on the road. I'm very interested to see, like, hey, Charlotte, you're going on the road. Like, this is another big-time game. You're able to handle it on your own home court. Like, I think this is, if you win this game, regardless of what happens, or, like, regardless of what happens in the first round of the playoffs, I think it's a step in the right direction for your franchise if you get a win like this on the road where you can really feel good about yourself, and it's just momentum for the following season. I think that would be, just so valuable for this franchise. And, for Orlando, I think it's just time, like, the season's just been so disastrous from their perspective. I think it would be good for everybody involved that they just ended it tomorrow. All right, so let's go ahead and transition into the first round of the NBA playoffs. These first round games start on Saturday morning. What is it, like 10 a.m. Pacific? So this is our playoff bracket right now. Again, this is before, so like you see the Warriors and the Clippers, youtube.com/@thesportsentiment. You see it like right now. This is like before the play-in tournament started from this bracket that I'm flashing on the screen right now. But given what we have in front of us, it's going to either be the Warriors versus the Suns playing the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think regardless of what you get in that Warriors Suns playing game tomorrow, I think if it's Thunder and Suns, I think it's Thunder and 4. I think if it's Warriors that ultimately come out of it, I think it's Thunder and 5. I think the Warriors could pull off themselves a heroic performance, at home or on the road. But OKC's defense is just way too much. And they got way too many playmakers. They got matchups for pretty much everybody. Like, they could throw Cason Wallace on Steph, and he could do himself like a decent job, even though Steph will still drop 30. And their defense will just say, hey, you know what? If Steph drops 40, the hell with it. We just can't have anybody else beat us. And I think, Holmgren could shut down Porzingis. I think OKC can go chest for chest and pound for pound from a defensive perspective with anybody. And those guys are well rested. They've kind of milked it towards the back end of the regular season a little bit. Like, hey, let's get everybody right so we can run it back and, try to defend our title once again. OKC is just on a different level than a lot of these teams in the league right now. And, the Warriors might get one good performance at home, but over the course of it, this defense is going to be way too overwhelming. And, I think Oklahoma City, regardless of Warriors-Suns winner, is going to get it done in a relatively short series there. On the Western Conference side, Lakers and the Rockets. So the Lakers are banged up right now, and they had themselves, again, another good regular season under J.J. Redick. Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves are on the shelf. And there is just not a lot of meat on the bone outside of that. Sure, you got LeBron James, but really, we're going to say LeBron James at, 42 years old is going to, take this team to the promised land? I don't think so. And, when you're losing your, let's just call it number one and number two scoring options in Reeves and Doncic, like, really? You're going to tell me, like, Rui Hachimura and Jake LaRavia and, like, DeAndre Ayton? Like, Ayton might get benched in this series, honestly, versus Houston. And to me, the bigger problem is going to be, like, not only who's going to score for the Lakers, but who's going to stop, like, Şengün in this series? I don't think anybody. And I know the Houston, like, I think Houston has their flaws as well. But I think, like, the Lakers are going to just miss so much firepower offensively that it's just not going to matter. And the one metric everybody's looking at for this series is like, hey, the Lakers are one of the best clutch time scoring teams, or in, like, clutch games, they're one of the best teams this year. They think they would, like, have the second best record. Houston is one of the worst. Like, they're one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the league. The problem is all those metrics are penciled in for the Lakers with Doncic and Reeves in. And, like, we've seen enough data points, like, where there's just, when they're playing quality teams, the Lakers, without those guys, like, they're just not going to get it done. And over the course of a 7-game series with Ime Udoka scheming things up, like, Ime Udoka is one of the best, I would say, like, prepares in as far from a coaching standpoint that we have in, like, in a 7-game series. Like, he's going to make his fair share of adjustments. Like, he took a really, like, flawed, like, Rockets team, like, in the half court last year to, like, a 7-game series with the Warriors, and they had their own problems, the Rockets did last year. Now, don't get me wrong, like, Houston, like, do I think they're going to go far in this series, like, in these playoffs? No, but they're going to most certainly get out of this series with ease. I think this is Rockets in 5. I think KD was going to insert his dominance. They're going to need KD not to run their offense, but they're going to need his scoring and, more importantly, his isolation scoring in a lot of these games when things get tight in the fourth quarter. He's a winner, and we've seen that over the course of his career. Like, you're going to still take KD, in a 2-point game, to draw something up, right? When things are extremely tight in a playoff series, you just are. I don't care how old he is. So I think the Rockets get out of here in 5 games. Reeves and Doncic are most likely not coming back in this series at all. And if they do, it's probably game 7 in, like, 3 weeks from now. So these are long-term injuries that they're dealing with. And I just think, like, it's bad. I think it's just bad luck and bad timing for guys like LeBron and JJ Redick. And there was just not a whole lot else out there on this Laker roster because they just have so much invested in Doncic and Reeves. Not only from a financial perspective, but just from an offensive playmaking standpoint, you're missing a lot when those guys are not on the floor. Continuing the West, Nuggets and Wolves. This has been an awesome playoff series when we've gotten it. We got it in the second round like 2 years ago, and the Wolves wanted 7. We might have got it last year as well, and I think the Nuggets wanted 6. Like, these games are always tight. That's the bottom line. Like, you're gonna get Anthony Edwards, one of the best pure scorers, one of the best young pure scorers that we have in the game, and you're gonna get the best player, like, in the game, in Nikola Jokic. That's gonna impact everything. And we've gotten a lot of just clutch time games that come right down to the wire. Like, we've seen Edwards hit crazy shots in these series, in, like, over the course of this series over the years. Jokic has had, like, triple doubles. Like, we're talking, like, monstrous triple doubles in a lot of these playoff games against the Wolves. You could throw Gobert, you could throw Randall at these guys, and I think, like, it's not going to be enough to stop Jokic, obviously, but I think they could limit him. I think Gobert's going to be in foul trouble a lot in this series, but I think Gobert can have some success as well. Denver's defense has not been good post All-Star break, and I think that's going to catch up with them as the playoffs go on. I think is what's going to happen is we're going to have ourselves 6 clutch time games in this series, and I think Denver is going to win 4 out of the 6 of them. And I think you're going to see them all go back and forth. We're going to have some really fun games and some tight games in this Nuggets Wolves series. The one wild card that I'm going to throw out here, and he's been really good, for the Timberwolves versus the Nuggets, and that's Naz Reid. Because Reid's one of these guys that can get a tough bucket for you inside, but we all know the former sixth man of the year can also spread it out from a pick and pop standpoint and drain threes at a high rate. And he's one of these guys that can go 5 from 8 from 3, and all of a sudden the Wolves are up 10. But the Nuggets are healthy now, and I think, the Wolves are not as deep as they were last year. Like, they've gotten some good Terrence Shannon minutes off the bench, but they're going to miss Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was on their team last year and is now an Atlanta Hawk. They're going to miss him in a series like this on both sides of the ball. So I think Denver will be able to, exploit some things in that area and, really make things happen. So I got Denver in 6 in a very fun series. Spurs and Blazers. We got the San Antonio Spurs, who have been, just the definition of consistent all year. They ripped off over 60 wins. Wembanyama stayed healthy for the most part. And Wembanyama's in his first playoffs. Portland, I've talked about their young upside and their young assets. I think they're a year early. I think this team is on, I would say they're probably like a year ahead of the Houston Rockets. I think Portland will be like the Houston Rockets, like when we saw them last year. They're going to be the flat out, breakout candidate in the Western Conference. I wouldn't be shocked if Portland next year is a 4 seed when they get themselves a few more free agents and stuff. But I don't think they're there right now. This is a brutal matchup for Portland. I think San Antonio's going to be able to name their number in this series. Wembanyama is going to torch them, and I like Donovan Clingan down low. But it's going to be problematic. And the Spurs guards are going to have their way in this series. Castle's going to have 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists in this game. And it's just there's just way too much firepower from the Spurs standpoint in this series. Portland doesn't have, the fireworks to go up and down with these guys. And, that you already know that San Antonio Spurs arena has been, itching for some meaningful basketball for a few years now. That place will be off the chain. I'm also very excited to see the Portland crowd in a playoff series. So I'm interested to see this from both sides. But Portland, I like the young upside. They're a year early. I think this is an absolute W that they're in this spot with an interim head coach, I should mention, with Tiago Splitter, which, by the way, he needs to get promoted to the full-time head coaching gig because he's done himself a spectacular job given the circumstances with the whole Chauncey Billups stuff. So give him the full-time gig, run it back next year. Who knows what happens with Dame? I think this is Spurs in 5. It could be 4. I wouldn't be surprised. San Antonio, they travel on the road from their defense will travel on the road in Portland. And, you might steal a game. I could see them dominating games 1 and 2. You steal game 3 and then the wheels fall off game 4. I'll say Spurs in 5, but I wouldn't be shocked for a sweep. Jumping in the Eastern Conference side. So, Charlotte. We talked about Charlotte. They have the play-in game versus the Magic. The Hornets Magic winner will play the Detroit Pistons. I think the league and I think every NBA fan should want the Charlotte Hornets to play the Detroit Pistons because we've got, 3 or 4 regular season games? And the most recent regular season game, we had about 4 suspensions and 2 fights in the game. Duncan Robinson was getting in fights with he got himself a skirmish with Bridges or whoever it was. This is a rivalry, and you need new rivalries in the NBA. It's good for the sport, right? And especially are you kidding me? We have a potential to see these teams 4 more times, potentially more. The Detroit Pistons are a top 3 defensive efficiency in the league, where I think they were second in defensive efficiency this year, defensive rating. And you got this aggro Charlotte Hornets team. offensively. So I'd love to see that series. I'm hoping it happens. I'm going to be a Charlotte Hornets fan Friday evening for the play-in game so we can get that matchup because it's been a hated rivalry this year. A heated rivalry. With all that being said, I think that is a Pistons in 5 type of series. If Orlando gets in, I think Orlando gets swept. Orlando won't be able to break 95 in that series versus Detroit in any of the games. So I think everyone should watch Charlotte just so we could see the series, a best of 7 with those two teams that are, obviously Detroit is a young squad that, had some good moments last year in the playoffs and, are kind of like the Charlotte Hornets and the Portland Trailblazers, I feel like have very similar trajectories, and it's only upward. But Detroit wins handily there. Cleveland and Toronto. So Toronto has been the classic team this year, and they're 5th in the East, but they were the classic team this year that beat up on all the bad teams, and then when they stepped up in competition and played squads that were above 500, it just never really translated into wins. And I think that's what we ultimately have here. This is Darko Rajakovic's first, best of 7 series as a head coach, which I think is something that is going to be interesting to watch. I normally don't like taking first-year head coaches or, first time, NBA playoff head coaches, like in their first year to really escape the first round unless like the talent like just is so good compared to the opposition. But I understand they have playmakers and they got professionals like Ingram and Barnes has been in the playoffs. Barrett's been in the playoffs. Quickly's been in the playoffs. Like they got guys. I like Jamal Shed off the bench, former Houston Cougar. But Cleveland, like they just got too many professionals. They ran it back with the same team last year to this year. They added like Jalen Tyson, who's played quality minutes for them. Sam Merrill's a terrific, 3-point shooter that's going to come off the bench room and really like get hot in one of these games. And, I've been critical of Donovan Mitchell over the years, in these playoffs, just given what happened with his tenure in Utah. But we've seen Mitchell really take over in these playoff games where to the point where he drops 50 in these games. But it's never easy, for like, especially when he's been with Cleveland, like the Utah Jazz series has never went well. They would be first round exit or at the very best, a second round exit. When he's been with Cleveland, they always get out of the first round. With all that being said, Toronto's going to give him a punch here. I think this is Cavaliers at 6. I think Mitchell will have himself a 50-point game in one of these playoff rounds. It'll probably come against the Raptors here. But this is going to be a fun series. I'm very excited to see the Scotiabank Arena crowd in Toronto because we already know that place can get lit. And I think Cleveland's going to have themselves some challenges. Like this is going to be a good first round test for them. But like we said, Toronto, when they stepped up in competition, it didn't translate into wins. So I could see Cleveland in 6 here. And, the core of, Mitchell and Harden will be able to win you a first round series, like with its playmaking. But to me, like it's Jared Allen. Like Allen will be able to impose his will in a game like this. And I like the second unit a lot more for Cleveland compared to the Raptors. Raptors good year, but they really took advantage, of a weak Eastern Conference. Let's go to my favorite first round series on the Eastern Conference side, and that's Knicks and Hawks. That's too bad the Atlanta Hawks couldn't trade back for Trae Young in this series because we already know Trae Young will always step up when he sees the New York Knicks and, the Madison Square Garden floor. But he is a Washington Wizard now, and that has been really the saving grace for the Atlanta Hawks because when they traded away Trae Young and they completely ran their offense through Jalen Johnson, it resulted in so many more good things, not only for Jalen Johnson, but for everybody else around him. Jalen Johnson, former first-round pick out of Duke. What do you average? Like 27, 7, and 6 this year? Like, it was just some astronomical numbers for this guy. And when they ran the offense through him, where it's just a pure 3-level scorer that can create his own shot, and you got a guy like Dyson Daniels that is just going to be a defensive stopper and could really complement with his scoring. You got CJ McCollum, who was a pro that got flipped from the Trae Young deal, that's plugged in very nicely here. They got Okongwu. They have, Kuminga, who's going to be a wild card off the bench. Who knows what you get from him? They got Alexander Walker, who's the most improved player of the year. The Hawks have the horses to go with the Knicks. And we already know with the Knicks, they got high expectations. They're in win now mode with Brunson and Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby. They got all the pieces in place. This organization believes to go in a championship. And it's championship or bust for this team. And Mike Brown's in a tough spot in his first year leading the squad where who knows, the Knicks are so reckless and they believe in their team and they've invested in so much from a draft capital standpoint and salary cap perspective where if they lose to the Hawks in the first round, who knows what this team looks like next year from a leadership standpoint and on who's on the floor. So with all that being stated, I think this is going to be a very competitive series. I think we saw a regular season game 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, and it came down to a CJ McCollum half-court shot that went in, but a tenth of a second too late. And I think this is a 7-game series. I think the Knicks will win it in 7. This is going to be this Knicks series is going to be a lot. I wouldn't say a lot but it's going to be very back and forth. They're going to get all that they can handle against this relatively young Atlanta Hawks roster. Very similar to what it was with the Pistons last year, even though the Pistons wanted to play street fights with everybody. This one I could see being a whole lot more high scoring. I could see a lot of 120, 116 type games in this series. But give me the Knicks in 7. I think the Hawks are going to do a really good job at, defending. They're going to win their games in Atlanta. I could actually see Atlanta stealing a game here. This is a series. I would not be shocked if the Hawks go in on the road and win game 1. The Knicks defend and win game 2. And, the Hawks are leading 2-1. New York comes back and responds on the road and wins. And then, we're going back and forth from there. This is going to be a very tight series, and we're a series where I think Atlanta is going to really set the tone early and be like, yeah, we're here to play, and this thing's going deep beyond, just a gentleman's sweep, what most people might think. Speaking of gentleman's sweep, this is the one that I do think will be a relatively quick series with the Sixers and the Celtics. I'm sorry. Until proven otherwise, I think this is going to be a 5-game series. Boston, with Joe Mazzulla and what he's done this year, has just been nothing short of incredible. The fact that they, just completely depleted all of the salary cap with what they had a year ago, dumping Drew Holiday, dumping Kristaps Porzingis. They got Anthony Simons off the books as well. Everybody that was costing a pretty penny outside of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum got dumped off the roster. And they basically just inserted their entire young core and all their second-round picks from the past 2 to 3 years, besides Peyton Pritchard, and just said, go to work, fellas. And you throw the Balin Shiremans and, the Hugo Gonzalez's and, then the Mias Quedas of the world that have been kind of waiting for their chance and have been high upside pieces, but with Boston picking number 31 every year because they're a contender in this sport, and just being really good talent evaluators, they've thrown that entire team while Jason Tatum was recovering from his Achilles, and they completely surpassed everybody's expectations. So Mazzulla, I think, is going to find a way to make things happen. I've been so impressed the way Tatum's look post Achilles tear. I think it's incredible the fact that he came back this year and that, you basically have the Jason Tatum that you had a year ago before the Achilles tear. Maybe not at that level, but it's pretty close. And I didn't envision it going this well uh, for Jason Tatum. If you would have told me he tore his Achilles in like May of, 11 months ago. So incredible recovery and, looks even better on the court, of course. And, Philly, are you going to get Joel Embiid back? Who in the hell knows? To me, that doesn't really matter. I guess it matters, but hell, he could come back for game 1 and then all of a sudden he's ruled out for game 2 with some other injury. I understand they got some adults here with guys that have been around and Maxey and George, and they're going to get everything that they can handle. But I think the Celtics defense is going to really come to play in a series like this. This is not the Orlando Magic anymore that Philly's playing. These games I feel like will be close in Philly. But I think this is a 5-game series in favor of the Boston Celtics, and they go out here and, really lay the hammer down. And that's the way I ultimately see it. I understand they got Nick Nurse, Philly, but Joe Mazzulla, I mean, for what he's done with this roster this year, he should be in Coach of the Year conversations. He's not going to win it. Like, they're going to give it to the Pistons and Bickerstaff. But, man, for what he's done this year to get this team to a 2 seed has just been, quite honestly, one of the bigger shocks of the entire, NBA just landscape this year. And I feel like that needs to be documented. And I think it'll be documented here. And it's been most certainly, been passed around throughout the entire NBA space, wherever you look, that, wow, Boston was supposed to probably be the 7th best team, 6th best team in the East this year. Given what they had on paper in the preseason, the fact that they're in this spot winning over 50 regular season games is pretty nuts. So look, that's going to do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. Wanted to come on here, spend a little over 70 minutes of our time and, just talk some NBA basketball. It's an exciting time of the year. No more of this regular season nonsense. This is when you actually get quality basketball. I'm not one of these guys that sits down and watches the NBA every night, but I have a sense of what's going on. So, I'm been following these teams, even though I've been nosediving into, all things college basketball, throughout our time. And that's been, been surfacing on the YouTube channel and the podcasting airwaves, here on the Sports Sentiment. But, how to turn back the clock for the one time, and give the people what they wanted here with some NBA talk. So hope you all enjoyed it. We'll probably give an update, sometime down the road on some of these series. Maybe do like a mid-series checkup or something along those lines. We'll see how things go and how my schedule aligns. But hey, NBA playoffs are about to start, and just wanted to get all my thoughts all out there. But as always, subscribe, helps us out a ton. We're trying to grow the podcast with this thing every more, showcase our versatility that we have here. Beyond just what we got from a college football and college basketball, just world and, standpoint of covering that. We're here covering, we're nosediving into multiple dimensions within the sports world. So again, appreciate the love. And once again, I'm your host, Nick Urias. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast.